Here we are in New Taliban, and today is Saturday, the 29th of November, 2014. And we have with us today both Tapapunja and Kamalavati Mataji, and both have recently come to New Taliban. Were for quite some years in Vrindavan. One of the things that devotees in general like to hear about, maybe we can begin with that and we can go on to other things, is things, just like you were mentioning a little earlier, that are connected with Srila Prabhupada in terms of the lifestyle, simple lifestyle connected with the land and with cows. And, the question comes to the mind of the devotees, do Prabhupada really want and expect that we really do this?
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment on that? Or,
Yeah. Well, I came to New Vrindavan after being in Denver for a year, so I got to New Vrindavan in 1972, and got married, and my then husband, Yudhisthira, wanted to live self-sufficiently. Okay, so we got 10 acres of land from Kirtananda. We got a lifetime lease on 10 acres that are now actually where the temple is. And but back then it was totally a dirt road. It was all woods and fields, and there was an old pioneer house made of logs. And so we stayed in a school bus while we took apart the house, and with no power tools or anything. And mostly Yudhisthira, of course, he piled up the logs and built a house out of in the basement of the old house. And then across the street was an old dilapidated barn, and we got a cow. And we also started raising a team of oxen. So like every day, we were about a mile from Madhaban, which was the closest temple where the big Jagannath deities were and a lot of the householders were.
Is that where Prabhupada had come?
He came, yeah, right. He stayed right across the street from the Madhaban temple, near there, yeah, okay. Down the road.
How many devotees approximately were there at the time?
Oh gosh,
30.
30? Relatively small.
Yeah. Early days of moving down.
Yeah.
Pre-palace, pre-everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the palace hadn't been started yet. And so we were out there by ourselves, and every morning Yudhisthira would get up at 3:30 and hook up the oxen, and we'd go by ox cart to the temple for Mangal Arti.
Oh, that's nice.
And he'd milk the cow, and I had one child, one baby at that point, actually an adopted baby. So that was an interesting story in and of itself, because I was visiting the New York Brooklyn temple where Radha Govinda are, and I was praying. We'd been married about a year, and I was praying to have a child. We'd been following strictly, and this woman came up from behind me right in front of the deities, and she was 7 months pregnant and asked if I'd take her baby. So when she had the baby, she gave him to me.
Wow.
And his name is Haladar.
Not a devotee.
No, it's just Krishna fulfilled that desire, just like that. And so I brought him, Haladar, back to New Vrindavan, and we were, like I said, we were staying in a school bus while we were building the house, and washing diapers in a stream, and I was, trying to just live off the land. We, picking whatever we could to eat, and
growing a few things.
Not at that point. We weren't established. It was all just woods and fields, no running water, nothing. Yeah, it was totally wild. And then we built the house, and there happened to be an old well, an old stone well, right outside the house, and we made an outhouse, and we used the oxen, and right across the road where the lodge is now, there, we plowed the fields. I held the plow, and Yudhisthira guided the oxen. And yeah, and then we planted a big vegetable garden, and he was milking the cow every day. And then when the vegetables came in, I canned all the vegetables for winter, so we'd have food. We didn't, we weren't relying on money at all for anything. And so then that was like 1973, and we moved in the house. And then Srila Prabhupada came in 1974 down the road where he was staying, and he was sitting out on the lawn, and Yudhisthira was taking the oxen up the road. I wasn't there at that point. I was down at the house, and the oxen.
Prabhupada was giving darshan actually,
outside
every night.
Was that? I went to New Vrindavan in 1974.
So maybe you were there.
Well, I got initiated there.
Ah.
In July.
Yeah, that's when it was.
Is it?
That's when it was.
Okay, yes.
And where you got initiated was under the maple tree in Bahulavan.
Ah.
And where this event took place was about 3 miles down the road. That was a part of New Vrindavan nobody even really knew about, very remote. But there was a house there we called the Gray House, the house that owned by non-devotees previously.
Okay.
And every night, Prabhupada would give darshan. So that was the setting. That here comes Yudhisthira with the ox team up the road.
Yeah.
Devotees are sitting on the lawn. Prabhupada's sitting on his Vyasa outside giving darshan.
And then the oxen just broke away from him and ran right over to Prabhupada.
Wow.
And stopped right there, and they wanted his darshan too. And Srila Prabhupada explained to Yudhisthira that he needed to put nose rings in so he could control them.
Okay.
And so the next day, so he did do that. He went back, did that, and then the next day came back with the nose rings. And he started explaining to Srila Prabhupada how we were living self-sufficiently. And he invited Srila Prabhupada to come to our house to see how we were living. And Prabhupada said he would come. And Kirtananda overheard it and told Yudhisthira not to bother Prabhupada, and we shouldn't have said anything. But so we had thought, we offended him, and we thought he wouldn't come. But then the next morning, after I guess they were taking Srila Prabhupada down the road to the creek for his morning walk, real early in the morning. And then that was past our house, and on the way back, all of a sudden all the cars stopped, and Srila Prabhupada came out. And we weren't expecting him at all. And Kirtananda said, Srila Prabhupada's here. And so, he came in the house, and, we showed him how we were living. We had the canning jars and an altar, and we had a hand pump by then. And, we were saying how we milked the cow and had the oxen. And he just said, this is perfect. This is how everyone should live. And he was very pleased. And I didn't say anything to him personally, but Yudhisthira was talking to him. I was kind of in shock.
So Prabhupada said, this is how everyone should live.
Yeah, that's how I understood.
Right.
Yeah. And so then they left.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was a young brahmachari. I was a 1974 when Prabhupada came. I probably saw you at your picture initiation, in fact.
Yeah.
And New Vrindavan at that time was really 3 farms. There was 4 actually. There was the original old Vrindavan. The first devotees, Kirtananda, IDVM, others came. And for the first few years there was nobody staying there because it was just so austere. Just a landlocked, 130 acres landlocked log cabin with an old county road that was in such disrepair that a vehicle couldn't even go there. Of course, Srila Prabhupada stayed there in 1969 for 30 days, which is very unusual. He spent 30 days in 1969, then he came back in 72 to New Vrindavan, and he delivered the Bhagavad Dharma lectures. He was there for 10 days, and then when you saw him, 74, he was there roughly for 10 days.
74 has been the third time?
Third time.
Oh, I see.
And his last visit was 1976.
Okay.
So, at that time, New Vrindavan was 4 farms. It was a wonderful village-like atmosphere. There was the Brahmachari farm, which the original New Vrindavan. Then there was what was called, where Kamalavati was describing, Madhuban farm, where a few householders lived with Jagannath deities and Radha Krishna worship.
Right.
Then there was what we called Nandagram, which is another area, and they had their own deity. That became the first New Vrindavan Gurukul. And then there was Bahulaban farm, which was kind of like it was eventually the place where Radha Vrindavan Chandra were worshipped for, I think, 15 or 18 years. And that's where Prabhupada actually spent most of his time. When he would come to New Vrindavan on those visits was in Bahulaban. So Bahulaban was a beehive of activity, especially just before Prabhupada would come. There would be this explosion of energy of just getting everything ready.
Wherever Prabhupada went, just before he came there, it wasn't.
and just to get Bahulaban clean, so it was presentable and sattvic,
yes,
was not an easy task, because in those days, New Vrindavan was known for many things, especially austerity, and everything was mud. I mean, it was constantly muddy and wet, and so just to keep mud out of the temple, or mud, good luck,
Right, right.
So there were 3 teams of working oxen. There was a team of working horses. There was gardening going on. This is, of course, before the palace.
Right.
And it really was a village. And the reason it was a village is because there was very much a mood of interdependency between the devotees. You really relished having the association of devotees, not just because they were sadhikas like yourself, always attending Mangal Artik, always enthusiastic about hearing and chanting, speaking Krishna Katha, but because the actual daily effort to gather the firewood and grow the vegetables and raise children and all that was done with such a mood of interdependence,
Right.
that it really felt like a village. It was really wonderful.
Actually, that's probably one of the most important aspects that is there in the Vedic culture, what we call natural interdependence. We all interdepend upon one another when things are properly done.
It didn't feel like austerity either. I mean, when we were young, it was like fun. It was an adventure, and you never thought about not going to Mangal Arati. No one ever, even that wasn't even on the table. You just had to do everything you did, and that was just part of how you lived. It was just normal.
Did either of you spend time in other communities at some particular point?
Well, I guess the paradigm shift that changed from a village atmosphere to a very successful preaching project was the building of Prabhupada's palace. The day that Prabhupada's palace officially opened, September 24th, 1979, I remember it well because we had a marathon for about a year leading up to it.
Right.
Just intensive effort to finish the palace by that date. But in the year between 79 and 1980, all of a sudden New Vrindavan was hosting 100,000 people. That's how many people came to see the palace, first year. And basically every year after that for about an 8 or 10 year period.
Yes.
So how are you going to be a self-sufficient farming community when you've got 100,000 people knocking on your door?
And you have to host them.
You have to take care of it.
Yeah.
So it was an explosion of book distribution and tours of the palace and outreach. And that's where I was kicked out of the nest, as I was asked to, as a brahmachari, I was asked to go out and take care of satellite temples, basically college cooking classes and lunch programs and book distribution and collecting the funds that were necessary to build the Vrindavan down.
Right.
Yeah.
So the whole village situation kind of changed.
And we, of course, we made mistakes in our zeal to do wonderful things for Prabhupada. But the wonderful thing was that we would come back from our travels and see progress always. There's always new buildings going up and new opportunities. And in a short period of time, New Vrindavan went from, say, 100 people to 750 people. They just ballooned to that population in about a 6-year period. Everybody wanted to come and experience the bliss of doing everything for Prabhupada's pleasure.
Right.
So it's so sweet.
Yeah.
And I left actually in 1975. I left New Vrindavan in 1975. I didn't stay for any of that part of it because, the reality is we were trying to live as a family and we were being kind of ostracized for doing that and kind of, it was very much discouraged. And so we left to start a farm for the Boston Temple. And then that didn't quite work after a while, and we tried to do it for the Buffalo Temple. So we were still trying to do the self-sufficient farming, but more independently.
I see. I suppose New Vrindavan, in terms of the Srila Prabhupada's palace, is a very unique situation. There's no Prabhupada palace in other farm communities, and therefore, but maybe just a small question, for example, although there is no Prabhupada palace in other communities, like here in New Taliban, for example, or Hari Sevak, or Kirtanagari, over the years, as we have observed, those farm communities didn't really blossom as Prabhupada wanted or expected them to blossom in terms of having many families and living in a self-sufficient way. Any comment in terms of why that happened the way it did, or what's the remedy to bring it back to the kind of village atmosphere you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a fascinating era of history, actually. When the first wave of Prabhupada's disciples came to live in those rural communities, and for that matter, even in the city temples, in one sense, the virtually speaking, you couldn't, except for the color of the dhoti, you couldn't distinguish much between a brahmachari and a householder.
Okay.
Everybody lived a very renounced life. There was strict adherence to sadhana and a mood of bhakti that was, you could cut it with a knife. It was so thick. And as society changed, and as ISKCON society changed, the ability of people, especially people who were hoping to raise a family, changed. It was just not, you weren't able to embrace that level of renunciation in the same way you did when you were in your early 20s. Like, you came when you were how old? 17? She was 17. I was 24. And so many people were there who were just barely 20 years old or something. So your ability to perform austerity and renunciation is when everything is going into one kitty, everything's being collected and distributed according to need, like that. That's a certain kind of lifestyle. And when that changes, for whatever reasons, devotees had to readjust to that reality that they needed clothing, they needed this. The temple couldn't just be the support system for all of your needs as a householder.
You have to take responsibility for as an adult. You have children, you have to take care of your children. and take, not just be told what to do and then that absolves you of your responsibility, but you're making choices and you're choosing and taking, then you've got to follow up and take care of what you've set out to do.
Well, here's a question maybe connects with this. We know very much how in city temples, especially, that all the members, all the devotees who are part of the city temple. It's like, in one sense, one family, and everyone is under like the temple president, and it's like, but when you have like a community in a rural setting, then I guess maybe the question I'm asking is, should a rural community be run or organized on the same principles as we do city temple?
No, because very often the duties inherent with being a book distributor or caring for the verminical side of how the temple runs, how the temple is kept clean, how money is handled, how donations come in, how you cultivate people from the outside.
Right.
That's one whole area of responsibility that requires a certain set of skills. The same skills and attitudes and aptitudes required for that are not exactly the same as what's required to farm, for example, to actually dedicate yourself to a...
or to raise a family, right?
Or to raise a family, yeah. In terms of farming, the mental, the physical endurance and the mental discipline required for farming is not ordinary. And most devotees are coming from urban backgrounds. So the management of that, therefore the decision making, how those decisions are made, by whom, how they affect those devotees who are trying to dedicate themselves to that farming service or cow protection service, should of course work cooperatively with the Brahminical side of the temple. Right. But it really is a different paradigm. It really is. And when you try to impose upon the farm, there's this kind of dynamic tension that takes place, where the devotees who are out performing a lot of physical austerity feel a little bit misunderstood or unappreciated, as compared to when you live in a temple and your attire reflects your preaching environment. Basically, you're keeping yourself very clean to present yourself before the deities or before guests, or to go out and do speaking engagements. And farming is hard, sweaty, dirty work, and it requires a kind of a different set of attitudes and aptitudes to accomplish it, actually. So there is an interesting interface there that has to work, actually, to make both of them work. But I think what you'll find is that a lot of the farms were feeling that there was outside financial influence was kind of dictating who's controlling the purse strings here, and how decisions were made. And farming by nature farmers by nature are a little independent. That's a lot of the reason people want to be farmers, because they feel that they have a particular way to serve Krishna, independent of that kind of strict control like that.
Let me ask a question regarding, because the educational side is like a very vast topic, very important one. We were talking earlier about training, education, something you were doing actually quite a bit in Vrindavan. And what's your understanding of how we as a society, as kind of society, specifically our community projects, rural projects, what should we be doing in that respect?
Well, the guiding principle to align ourselves with what Prabhupada wanted is making sustainability, connecting the dots, I should say, between sustainability spirituality. In other words, in one sense, there's what I've observed many years of both farming and preaching is that there's a kind of a philosophical disconnect between what motivates you to be sustainable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And the facility that's provided for you to accomplish that goal. The devotees who are inclined to work on the land feel very demoralized when their efforts are not. They don't see the results of their efforts being offered to the deities, for example. Like you'll find that within Prabhupada's greater family, ISKCON, that there's very often, when you talk with devotees who are farmers or gardeners, you'll always find the same complaint everywhere, which is that I bring it in, I grow it, I care for it, I bring it in, they don't use it. So you have to wonder, like, well, what's that? What's causing that? What's the disconnect there that's causing that? Is it the purchasing department? Is it where is this disconnect? So that my observation is the disconnect is a philosophical disconnect. We don't understand that what's pleasing to Krishna is that it is from the hands of the devotees.
Right.
Or as Krishna himself explains, if one offers to me in love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water. Well, the key word in that sloka is if. And that if hinges on, is it coming from a point of origin in which it's been handled with love and devotion? Or is it just something that you've purchased because it was an easier thing to do, to get donations, to go out and buy it, than to actually learn the skill sets and the attitudes required for growing food yourself and making sure that what you grow is what you offer and what you eat.
Well,
there's a whole culture behind that.
also, it's about relationship, because in Krishna consciousness in the spiritual world, it's all about everyone relating to each other, not just serving Krishna and but helping each other and connecting. And so when we're relating to the earth and doing things in a very tangible, practical way, like planting the seed, and then you have to depend on Krishna to, for the plant to grow. Or you're having a relationship with the cow, and when she's feeling cared for and loved, she's going to give the milk, which then you give to your child. And then, to get to Mangal Arati, you have to go with the oxen, which means you have a relationship with the oxen. And, you're not just sticking a key in a car. And so, even, just simple things like we didn't even have a refrigerator. I took the milk and put it in a jug and lowered it into the well to keep it cold. Or I used a non-electric sewing machine to sew for the deities and for our own clothes. So it just kind of allowed us to kind of slow down and really connect and appreciate and value what it meant to really feel that love, to actually slow down and feel that love and connection.
I would think that that's one of the big flaws in modern day society. People are too busy, pace of life is so fast, and that establishing such relationship is flawed. It's not there, or it's artificial, or not deep, or whatever like that. But coming back to so that means what you're saying is that again there's a disconnect. So that requires, I suppose, some kind of training or some kind of...
Exactly. It requires a dialogue between the management of the temple and the handling of finances and the building of relationships between the management and the devotees who are in the field.
Right.
If we take an example of how, in idealized example of Vedic culture, the Kshatriya, as I understand, correct me if I'm mistaken here in any way, but the Kshatriya king was eager to give land to people who would use it productively, and he would charge a flat tax, basically 25% of what was produced. So, in order to turn this around so that we actually can inspire and encourage, incentivize devotees to become native to a particular project, actually not just live on the land, but with the land, in harmony with laws of nature, and especially in harmony with Prabhupada's will, that lifestyle of actual rural Krishna conscious living, in the beginning, because of the backgrounds that we all come from, general urban backgrounds, and that the pattern of how money is allocated and how decision making is done. In order to embrace that lifestyle, there has to be a kind of subsidized program. I don't mean a welfare handout, but it means recognizing an earnest desire to live that way, and then facilitating, especially younger devotees, facilitating them so that, to use the example of the Amish are able to keep 80% of their children within the web of Amish lifestyles, because from the very beginning those children are learning the skills, the attitudes, and the aptitudes necessary for that lifestyle when they're small children.
Right.
So how do you do that? How do you emulate that when most of the devotees who are living in the rural projects are coming from very urban backgrounds, and they tend to want to bring those same values into a rural setting without reading the situation for what it is, without depending upon the outside economy to maintain like a middle class lifestyle. So it may well be that what would be pleasing to Prabhupada is that we live in a very simplified way, in which a monetized economy may be there, but it's not the dominant force in our life. The dominant force in our life in that kind of setting is the relationships that we have with the land, with the cows, with the deities, with the devotees, so that your needs are met without commodifying everything, without quantifying everything. So your wealth, therefore, is measured in terms of quality of relationship with all those things, not in terms of the value of your house, the assessed value of your house, the assessed value of your land, so you could resell it and go. We're not putting a price on everything.
Or your bank balance.
Or your bank balance. So, unfortunately, most devotees see their life in a rural setting as an investment that they can later sell the house, sell the land, like that, and then recoup those investments, then move on to some other thing. And, there may be reasons for that I'm not judging, but I'm just saying that's not akin to becoming native to a Dham, to really seeing Krishna in his energy in the Dham. Really learning how do you depend on Krishna for your food, for your medicine, for your shelter. What are the skills required to do that? So you're seeing Krishna everywhere in what facility is being offered to you right then, right there. And you're grateful for that, because you think your consciousness is, this is what Krishna is providing me with here. And if I embrace that, then whatever facility Krishna sends, I'm satisfied with that. That's the lifestyle that makes rural Krishna conscious living. That's the mentality, I should say, the consciousness that makes rural Krishna conscious living livable.
Well, why is that not happening?
Well, it's not. It doesn't happen because we're conditioned to think that our happiness depends on a kind of security that is really not. It's not really security.
That's the materialistic
Well, it's when we don't have faith. I mean, whatever we have, Krishna has given us. So and Krishna gives us what we need. So if we're not happy and satisfied with what Krishna's given us, how can we think we're going to be happier? We're not going to, because Krishna's given us what we need. So that's all we're going to get. We're not going to get anything more than that. So if you're not happy now, you won't be.
Connected with the message in the Bhagavad class this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Adjust the consciousness.
Yeah, it's the consciousness. And also in caring about each other and being and feeling gratitude and appreciation. And I think maybe that may be one of the difficulties is we've, growing up in this movement, have lacked the skills and understanding of how to really value each other and work with each other. I mean, whether it's in families or in the communities, we have not really understood how to really work with each other in a way that's not just power over, but more of a power with, where everyone matters, whatever is cared for.
So there are like two scenarios, I think, within ISKCON that we have to deal with, in the sense that in a temple situation, where you have a temple president, the members of that, we could call it community or that setting, are all kind of working under the directive of mainly the temple president. Whereas in the community, of course, in a rural setting, although there should be a leader, but there's probably more interaction or more semi kind of independence. Families need to take more responsibility, and that means more of a challenge possibly in terms of working with one another for our mutual benefit and ultimately for serving Krishna as well.
Well, that and of course the other aspect of that is that when you live in harmony with nature's rhythms, the natural unfolding of the Varnas and the ashrams,
Yes.
it's not like something you have to study, and
It's not,
it just unfolds.
Yeah, correct.
Because you really do see who's Brahmanically inclined.
Yes.
I used to see this is kind of an odd example of how you come to understand that, but for many years in New Vrindavan, we would go to these national rainbow gatherings.
Yeah.
And there are these, events with maybe 10,000 people in a deep, deep part of the forest somewhere where you have no electricity.
Yeah.
You have got to get your own firewood, your own water. We would set up camp. We would cook for thousands of people. We would have a morning program. We would put on plays. We would basically always bring back 15 or 20 people back to our community. Well, after about 10 days of kind of austere forest living with people who weren't necessarily devotees but were helpful,
Right.
you really start seeing who's a Brahmin here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's better at administration, who can just kind of nicely follow instructions like a Sudra would gladly carry out happily carry out the work that needed to be done. In other words, it just, and even the roles of men and women begin to kind of find a level of compatibility that just kind of made sense because you were so close to you were forced in that situation to live with the rhythms of nature.
So in a more natural setting, what
Yeah.
you're seeing is that the natural aptitude
Yeah.
and the qualities come out.
Yeah.
You don't have to force it.
Yeah. Whereas in the city, especially in the early days of, I know New Vrindavan was always kind of the place where temple presidents would send devotees who were not Brahmanically inclined, who were not necessarily book distributors or college preachers or could give a good class or studious and scholarly in nature. So they would send them to New Vrindavan. Maybe a one-way bus ticket to Wheeling, West Virginia. I know I used to pick them all up with the buses. And it was, it was our responsibility then to engage them in some service. And the other wonderful thing about a rural community that's amazing is that, especially in agriculture, I always was meditating on Prabhupada's statement that the day would come when many, many people would flock to our farms. So my meditation for all these years has always been, I want to be ready for that. I want to be able to please my spiritual master by having areas that can be worked manually by a lot of people. I want to prepare that area. I want to get that ready. I want to have the tools. I want to have the ability to manage that. I want to know how it fits into the food supply of the community. In other words, we have to be prepared for that day, whether it's now or 20 years from now. We should always be in the consciousness that my spiritual master has shown us the future.
Yes.
And basically instructed us that you need to be ready for this because many, many people will come. So when you think about that, it kind of blows open the possibilities of how many people can be engaged in agriculture. It can almost absorb any number of people. And when we hear about the glory days of the Vedic culture, sometimes devotees forget that the backdrop for all that was a flourishing agrarian economy.
Absolutely.
There were cities, but the cities, when you hear the descriptions of Dwarka or Hastinapur, were these fantastic parks, and there was green zones everywhere because that was so much part of the life of how to please Krishna.
But the majority of people were in the country.
Yeah.
The vast majority.
That was the backdrop.
Of course, subject matter, of course, is vast, as we both know. Is there anything that maybe you would like to focus on particularly, and number one, and secondly, before we close our interview here, I'd like to hear maybe from both of you. You can keep it in your background. Because you both have had many years of experience in rural lifestyle community, the question would be what advice you would have, let's say, for our younger generation in terms of, because although we've not succeeded to the level, and very far from that as well, from what Prabhupada expected, it's a big question in the minds of many people, many young people, younger generation. Is this really possible? Is this really practical? And as you could say, senior devotees who have been around since the early days, what kind of thought you would like to share or recommendation for our younger audience, so to speak. But before that, there's so many things that we could be discussing, but whether you have any particular point.
Yeah, did you have?
No, go ahead.
What I have observed in the many years of growing food for the temple and seeing what the impact of that activity has on how that fits into the greater community in a rural setting, like, for example, New Vrindavan and Utala, is that there are really two features to sustainability, and they have to go together. The first one is the technical side. In other words, how do you do things? How do you grow under these conditions? What are the tools? What are the methods? What are the materials? And those are vitally important aspects to understand. So that one thing that makes farming so exciting is that you have to constantly adjust farming is basically observation. You have to have, as I said, physical maturity and endurance and a lot of mental discipline. Because a lot of it is repetitive, a lot of it is just hard work. So what I've seen though is that if the technical side of farming is not in line with the other important aspect, the social side of it, that is very easily to become isolated and feel like you're simply engaged in a thankless task.
Right.
And then you want to be you want gratitude, or you want something that's not maybe so healthy for your spiritual life. You want income, you want this, you want so many things like that. You want to be appreciated, and you also want some you want money for what you're doing. You think, well, if they don't appreciate what I'm trying to offer the deities, then at least I should be paid for this so I can maintain myself. And of course you should be maintained in some way. So what I'm pointing out is that there's a social side to sustainability, and which it embraces also the spiritual side, what's motivating you to do it. And there's the technical side, and they have to go together. Otherwise, other devotees who are not necessarily inclined to farm or to be out on the land of that just kind of see you as some person who's just out in the field working hard, who's always got dirty clothes on.
Earlier we were discussing, I think maybe connected with the point you're making on the social side, the preaching dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so because we are the legacy bearers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, we're really about compassion and outreach to others.
Right.
Growing vegetables and grains, fruits, and milking cows and that.
It's not the ultimate goal of life.
Right. Quite honestly, I have a lot of, I know a lot of people on the outside who are not necessarily Krishna conscious, but they're expert at all those things. They are light years ahead of us in terms of those things.
Right.
So, what makes it nectarian for devotees who really do want to embrace a rural lifestyle is when you take the fruit of your work and first and foremost make sure it's going to the deities.
Correct.
But you also see how that can be used to reach out to broader society with just a message of goodwill that we grow and we distribute. We make it affordable. We make it available. And really, what you're hoping to do is make your association, or more correctly, the association of Srila Prabhupada available to others, because people ultimately want to know why would you be working this hard if you're not personally deriving some big profit from this? What's your motivation? So for a devotee, the motivation is to see how boga grown in fields is turned into prasadam, and prasadam
Goes out to as many people.
goes
as
out to
possible.
people, and then people can become curious and interested to ask the right questions.
You were doing that very thing, I think, in Vrindavan with, what do you call it, reaching out in a wheeler or...
Wheeler.
Yeah.
What is it?
Green Wheeling Initiative, it was called.
Yeah.
It was the result of 8 consecutive years of charitable distribution of huge amounts of produce.
How many groups you had again?
We had 18 gardens in the area.
18 gardens.
Yeah, that we were
That's a lot.
vacant lots, public school playgrounds,
Right.
anywhere that we saw where we could make an impact on.
What people call community gardens.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
like that. So the result of building that social capital led to financial capital, in the sense of grants. People began wanting to give us grants because we were obviously civic-minded.
Yep.
We were not personally profiting from it at all. And that caught the attention of private foundations who, in one sense they're looking for a tax shelter, but in another sense, many of them are actually nice people
Yeah.
who have money and they want to use it for a proper purpose. So slowly we built this whole wonderful network of soup kitchens, food pantries, low-income housing projects, churches, academia, the clergy, of people who felt that they had something to contribute to the effort of sustainability. But then what would happen is that they would come and begin asking privately about Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
Because they knew we were devotees.
Yeah.
So our motto was overperform and under-advertise what you do. It was humility. And it was that humility that really attracted people. That they just saw that we wanted to share something wonderful.
Genuine.
And absolutely authentic.
Correct.
And that led to workshops and busloads of people coming out to see the gardens.
And you got a fair amount of grants.
Yeah, we actually wrote, in a 2-year period, we wrote $88,000.
Within a 2-year
Yeah,
period.
2-year period.
Not bad.
And we didn't keep any of it. It was all used strictly to see that a local foods movement was up and running in that area. It was wonderful.
Well, that was very much in line with, or that is rather very much in line with, Prabhupada, Food for Life, for example, and the whole Brahminical kind of mood or Vaishnava mood of compassion, getting people connected.
Right.
Through prasadam is much easier for most people.
Especially in an area like that where the general populace of Appalachia, in this case Wheeling, are obese, diabetic. So they see bright-faced devotees who are in good health and eager to serve like that. And they're like, who are these people?
And sometimes they, like one time we were at a neighborhood meeting of people who were doing a community garden, and we were trying to support them in that. And this one lady asked us where we lived, and we said, well, out by the Palace of Gold. She said, really? Aren't you afraid of those people, those Hare Krishnas? No, and then we explained that we are actually one of those, that we are those people. But because she had already seen us as friends and that we were trying to help them, it disarmed her whole misconception of who we were.
After 8 years consecutively of charitable distribution, not being paid to do it, just doing it because it was the right thing to do, we were addressing a real need in that city, which was for healthy organic produce to people who could not afford to buy healthy organic produce, who were going to congregate meal sites for a meal or food pantries for a meal, like that. So that caught the attention of the culinary arts department, the head of the culinary arts department at a local community college. He was a chef instructor. And he invited us to go to a harvest festival at the college, which was a simple event, just an October gathering of all the chefs and the students at the school, and any people who happened to wander into the campus. And he said, all I want you to do is just set up a table, do a little demonstration on how to make compost or something, and put your vegetables out. So I had a spread of the vegetables that we had grown out, and I had a scale and some bags. And an elderly lady came up, and she picked some vegetables, and I weighed them. And she said, how much? And I said, $5 or $6, fine. And she said, that's ridiculous. Because these organic vegetables, where I live, in Pittsburgh, would be $20.
Okay.
And I said, well, I understand that, but our reason for doing it this way is we're more interested in community and relationships than we are in making a personal profit off of something that everybody needs, healthy food.
Right.
And she started crying. She actually welled up, and she was so moved by that statement. She actually started crying. So she said, let me go get my husband. So she brought her husband over. And he and I were talking for a little while, 2 or 3 minutes. And 2 or 3 minutes into our conversation, her husband and I, she broke in again. She said, by the way, he's the president of the college.
By the way.
So, in my mind, I'm going, wow, that was a home run,
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's what happened.
And they were vegetarian.
Yeah, and actually they were vegetarians.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. The president said to me, would it be okay for us to send our culinary arts students out to your farm?
Right.
And I said, sure, absolutely. I'd love to give a tour to them.
Yeah.
So they came out two different times, groups of 20 at a time.
Right.
And I had a whole little talk prepared for them in what we call the teaching garden, in which I went through what does it mean to be a cook? What are the responsibilities of being a cook? Is it just you get a job and you like to eat and you like to cook for people? No, there's a whole other side to this. So I wasn't directly preaching Krishna consciousness to them,
Right.
but they were kind of getting the message that the most important ingredient in the cooking is the consciousness of the cook, like that. So then as a result of them coming out, then I was being invited back to the college to give talks. So the bottom line is, would it have been better to get $10 more and not have that relationship?
Right.
Was that relationship and all the preaching that came from worth $10? Yeah, I think so. That's what I mean. That's the social side of sustainability.
Correct.
That because we understand that the gift of the miracle of how soil works, the miracle of how food grows, is something that is meant to be shared, and that people do have a basic human right to healthy food based upon Om Purnamada Purnamidam Isha Vaisham Idam Sarvam. So the social side of sustainability is our earnest desire to go out and reach people with the glory of Krishna. That actually this is not me. I'm just trying to facilitate and cooperate with the rhythms of nature here. One of which, the most important of which, is God's grace. That Krishna wants you to have this, wants you to offer it back to Him. So it's part and parcel of your spiritual upliftment. And that's what should motivate our farming.
We are instruments in getting people connected with us as mediums for them to connect with Krishna.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Through the mercy of Lord Nityananda, who is Lord Balaram. And Lord Balaram has actually expanded himself as the land and everything else to provide for us. So that's why, the prasadam distribution and everything, we're actually depending on Lord Balaram, and Lord Balaram wants us to give it to Krishna because he wants to always serve Krishna. And also, I just wanted to say that, like, my experience when I was young and learning how to, grow vegetables and be self-sufficient sustained me even when I wasn't living in a farming situation, that it's always good to know. It's something important to learn. It's how to grow your own food. Even if you're in an apartment, you can always grow sprouts and some plants.
Yeah.
Anything to be able to provide in that way. And that way you always know you have those skills, and that's really important to have.
And we keep that connection.
Mm-hmm.
That helps us to,
Right. Yeah, so that's really important to learn those things and know that you have that and can do it.
So that would be maybe a recommendation for our younger generation.
Yes.
Wherever you are.
Right, exactly.
Do something.
Yes.
Can I give an example?
Yeah.
In the city temple, that is predominated, as most of the ISKCON city temples are, by largely an Indian congregation. Wonderful people. Very often very cultured people, very pious, wonderful people. Unfortunately, within the greater Indian community of Canada and America, many people have fallen away from the standard of strict vegetarianism, especially younger.
Yes.
Especially those who are born, they're of Indian origin, ethnicity, but they fall into a pattern that was kind of a slow seduction into eggs, and then a little chicken is okay and a little fish is okay.
Westernization.
Before you know it, they're eating at McDonald's. Right? So imagine this. What if we could launch a revival within the greater Indian community of ahimsa? In other words, convince families of Indian ethnicity, whether they come to ISKCON temples or some of the big Hindu temples that are more polytheistic than they are, the Orthodox root of worship of Krishna. What if we were able to create what I call ahimsa support groups, by which a young teenager or a young adult coming into the workforce, about to go off to college, had such a deep understanding of why maintaining a vegetarian vow was crucial to their God consciousness. What if we were able to teach that in a way that actually revived the whole movement amongst the Indian population of maintaining that vow? What a wonderful service to Prabhupada.
Yes.
Because of all the ways that you can, fall from the path of Krishna consciousness, that one, the meat eating, is really severe.
Right.
And it's going on.
Yes.
So, that's something a city temple can do.
Yeah.
And they especially can do it if they have the support of, and they have in the background is a vibrant farming community that's providing healthy, nutritious vegetables and grains and all that.
Right.
So,
because there is quite a large number of Indian families, as you mentioned, especially in, pretty well all over the world, but quite a sizable number in both Canada and the U.S. And part of what they should be doing as well, part of their time. That's actually the point you're making is.
it's just like, in America there's this organization called MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And they're powerful because they're outraged at how the light sentences and whatnot people get for killing people with cars due to their intoxication and drunkenness. They're a very powerful lobbying group. So a temple president can send out, in a city temple, can send out two brahmacharis or two matajis or a householder couple.
Thank you very much for your.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.